Really great question, and definitely definitely broad, could be interpreted many ways, but as an organization, soliciting feedback and understanding the viewpoints of all of our stakeholder groups, whether that's communities or employees. Some of our greatest ideas have come in those blind spots, right, that we talk about. So soliciting the broadest possible perspective has been really important to us. We also, when we first developed our program, brought in a team from across the organization of completely different ages and stages, and brought everyone together to create kind of a think tank for the organization. And that helped in two ways. One, to bring in different perspectives from the organization, from the different departments, the different ages, the different experiences, but then also created a really effective mechanism for moving that information back out into the organization. So, kind of a broad question. Hopefully I answered it, but I think just engaging the broadest level that you can without trying to be all things to everyone has been really effective for us as an organization. Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and obviously I'm going to provide my personal viewpoint here, but I'm going to frame that with, we came up against a lot of opposition when we put that in our sustainability linked bond, and our sustainability linked lending, more so in the bond, because our second party opinion was coming from a US organization. And so I am of the opinion, and our organization is of the opinion, that that's a really important stakeholder group, and particularly for oil and gas and for resources as a whole, in order to do the primary operations that you need to do in order to transport. You need buy-in from that group, because they are rights holders. They are it is irrefutable in Canada that they are rights holders, and so they are a pivotal stakeholder group, rights holder group, that we need to engage and we need to understand. And in order to have an effective operation, we believe that they're important, not just because we have to, but also because they have a great opportunity to be partners for us. And so engaging them as partners has been very effective for us in creating value. And so treating it as, you have to do this because the Canadian government says so, or you have to do it because it's expected, is a really sort of short-sighted way to think about it and look at it. We've achieved the greatest success by looking at the ways that we can operate as partners. Good question. I think that in resources, while we are in Canada more at the forefront of the movement, we're still behind places like Europe. When I did my master's, my MBA in sustainability, and so I think I had a little more enthusiasm than the average resources person. And so one of the initial challenges that we bumped into was, well, like, why do we need to do this? Why is it important? And as that's evolved, I think there's a lot of momentum, and so it's much easier today to get those pieces integrated into the corporate world. But just general lack of understanding about why it's important was a big challenge originally. I think as we evolve, the additional challenges are finding that place where you can create, where you can operate at the intersection of responsibility and value. There are going to be times where to do the responsible thing, it's going to cost a little bit more. So how do you reconcile that as an organization? That has also been a little bit challenging, but there are lots of ways to look at things in new and creative light so that you can create value and be responsible. And then the third kind of challenge has just been ensuring that it rolls across the organization. It's great to create those sort of aspirational goals that we talk about. I think there's no shortage of aspiration in the sustainability space, but understanding how you can break that down into very specific milestones, actionable items has been important, and then taking that and creating buy-in across the organization. It's an excellent question, and I think I would cite kind of three key aspects. One, we can see in the media today that social license to operate is becoming more and more important in the digital age, in the age of social media. A company can very quickly get stopped. You see it in dissenting proxy votes. You see it in organizations stopping work in Alberta and in BC. And so social license to operate has become really important. Being a good actor is just part of what you need to be able to effectively run your business and ensure that you can keep moving forward in your in what you're doing. But of course, that's not the only reason. Access to capital is becoming more and more difficult in the resource space. And so in order to continue operating, in order to continue having access to capital, you need to have a differentiation. And this subject is becoming more and more important, not only to companies, to the larger stakeholder groups, including communities and governments, but it's also becoming more important to the financial providers as well. So understanding that in order to have access to capital, you need to be able to do those things is important. And then lastly, the third thing I would say is that as we're in this transition economy, there's going to be a push for the most responsible barrels of oil, the most responsible molecules of gas, the most efficient sources of energy to be the ones that we look to. And so if you had the option to fuel your car from a barrel of oil that created 100 kilograms of CO2 emissions versus one that was 10, which one would you choose? Would there be an incentive for you as an individual to pick that lower emissions barrel? And I think as a society, we've already decided that that is the case. It's not just the taxes that you're going to see, it's the importance to the individual as the end consumer. I think it's a really important question for the individual consumer of the data, but also for us as a society. And it goes back to that good actors, bad actors thing. I think everyone has the intention, but accountability can come in many forms. And so when we talk about sustainability linked debt, having someone who is overseeing that, there's a framework, there is a requirement for third-party assurance. It's no longer just a story. This is another action you can take that furthers the transparency, that ensures the accountability, and aligns all of those pieces together. And it's those extra advantages, the engagement of extra individuals, that I think can really improve the situation. There's also a push for it to be included by the Sustainability Standards Board, for example, in which case it's going to be like financial reporting. There's going to be a process for assurance. There's going to be a process for creating a level playing field. It's not just intentional greenwashing. Obviously, they're going to be bad actors, but there's also just a misalignment of there is an opportunity for people to interpret things in a way that is convenient and effective for that individual organization, which then prevents comparability. And so that's almost unintentional greenwashing. We're going to calculate something this way and someone else calculates it another way, and now it's no longer comparable. And so that move to create a system of standards, I think, is really important to ensure that there is clarity, like you said, that outcomes are actually being achieved versus just aspired to. Absolutely. I think it's like anything. I think there's a huge spectrum of responses to it. There are people who are excited and interested in finding a way to create the best opportunity for the world. And I don't think that there is a clear it isn't clear what that is going to be yet. But just being part of the evolution and being at the forefront is exciting for some organizations. But it can be very daunting. Not everybody is comfortable with that kind of transformative evolution in their business. And so, when you're a small organization or an organization that's been very focused on one core aspect of the business, trying to create that evolution, sort of the disruptive technology can be very overwhelming. And so, yeah, to answer your question, that was kind of a long-winded way to say that I think there is varying responses to it, but I think there is an acknowledgement that there needs to be some foresight to it. That the transition is about creating the most efficient outcome for the world, and whether that's just making your own barrels more efficient or understanding that there are going to be new and exciting technologies that you can be a part of, I think there will be a variety of responses to it. Yeah, that whoever asked that question should be part of the Canadian policy making panel. Yeah, no, it's a really difficult question to answer. Especially when you consider how much of Canadian oil and gas is exported. Um, the the ways that it can be addressed obviously are complicated and varied, but there are lots of incentives right now. We see taxing here as a nation, but a lot of that money goes back in Alberta. There's a tier fund to incent kind of technological advancement. And I'm going to circle back to kind of what we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, and that's finding that place where you can operate at the intersection of responsibility and value. So there might be times that an unfortunate decision has to be made that you're going to pick something that is less responsible because you can take that dollar and use it more effectively in another part of your operation. And so balancing the technologies that are available, using your dollar for the most efficient operation will help Canada as a whole to continue to remain competitive. But it is difficult without government intervention to compete with someone like the Middle East or like Central America, where you're seeing different requirements for responsibility.
And
Definitely evolved over the last 10 years. And yes, that when we think about, the world needs more Canadian energy, that's really what it's about. That we are producing in a way that is responsible socially, it's responsible environmentally, and we our aspirational hope is that yes, at the end of the day, everyone should be choosing those molecules of energy that are produced in the most responsible fashion. Whether we can see a market scenario where people are willing to pay a bit more for that, it's still yet to be seen. But certainly, as someone who's in sustainability and finance, that is my yes, my aspirational goal, and I do think that there is the opportunity for that to happen with so many countries moving towards more you know government responsibility in addition to individual responsibility. It's a really great question. And obviously, my job is to tell you that Tamarack differentiates itself. And I think we have been a leader in many ways, just in terms of being at the forefront of disclosure of things like the sustainability linked lending, of assurance and Indigenous partnerships. And so we are constantly looking for ways to be at the forefront. But I also want to say that I'm just so proud of everything that the Canadian industry has done. It's great to talk about us as one organization, but really, what Canadian oil and gas has done is very impressive in terms of ESG leadership when compared to other industries and other parts of the world. Canada is, a definitely leader as a whole in this space. And so if you're looking for specific examples of way that we do it, reporting and disclosure, you can look at there is a PwC report out on disclosure. And if you look at Canada and you look at oil and gas and energy in general, they're leaders in the types of disclosure, the amount of disclosure, and things like assurance over disclosure. So that transparency and accountability, I think, is really important. And also innovation. You look at carbon sequestration projects, geothermal projects. Obviously, there's lots of excitement in Europe, but I think Canada as a whole has been at the forefront. And then you look at kind of innovative incentives like the sustainability linked lending. And I think that's another great example of ways that we're showing leadership. It's not just about a new product. It's about how that product then rolls out into aligning stakeholder objectives in terms of increasing accountability and increasing transparency. That I think the enthusiasm that the younger student generation brings is so important. And so I would say just ensuring that you have a seat at the table, have your voice heard. And even if you're a new person in an organization and you're in a junior role, there are people that want to hear from you. So, when you're part of the organization, make sure that you step up and have your voice heard in a way that's meaningful for that organization. Your ideas and your enthusiasm will benefit us all organizations and everyone as an industry.
Awesome. That's I think a perfect wrap up. And I couldn't have said that any better myself. So definitely opens our eyes to kind of what's going on in the industry and kind of the intense innovations that are going on in terms of like, how do we create a more responsible product, more responsible barrel of oil, and a more responsible, I guess, what's the unit for gas? I don't I don't know.
Gigajoule, yeah.
Gigajoule. That's it. Yes, I did take physics in high school, so I kind of remembered, but I didn't really. So I just wanted to say that's all the time we have for today, unfortunately. But I just wanted to say thank you so much June Marie, for coming in. These were some, it was an amazing presentation, and honestly, your answers to our questions were even more informative and interesting. So just want to say thank you again, and I'll leave you if you want to just say any last things before we end the show here.
No, I'd just like to say thank you to the team for having me. It's always exciting to be part of the movement and share perspective with the up and coming generation. So thank you for allowing me to share my ideas, but also to hear the things that you guys are thinking about and that are important to you.